I researched the online right wing for days preparing for this video, and I feel like I've gone insane. I hope that my quest to find the nuggets of truth amid anonymous posts on Rumble and X, and for those not allowed there on Gab and Telegram, can avail the right wing of its negative and self-destructive tendencies so that it can become a powerful and positive structuring force in the world, posing a significant challenge to the control and ideology of the ruling class. My challenge and questioning are from a place of love and desire to serve others, and to have an enlightened class of political dissidents. This is a message to the right, not a message about the right. My question for Republicans, to paraphrase that great philosopher Aristotle, is: do you value the policy of the Republican political class, or the values that preserve constitutional republics? The values that preserve the welfare and functioning of constitutional republics, or democracies for that matter, are obviously a moral and well-educated public body that is able to make reasonable decisions on behalf of the whole and assimilate knowledge of the good as it relates to the organization and decision of the body politic. Can anyone genuinely say that this is true of the American populace or our elected leaders of either political persuasion? What about the political thought leaders who amass millions of views on their podcasts, social media posts, and YouTube clips? Do they have the answer? Reactionaries. What reactionaries, who seem to believe that the last 800 years were a mistake, seem not to understand is that God can turn transgression into progression. There is no need to go back to some imagined golden age that was as replete with repression and sorrow as any other. We must seize on the ideals of the modern era, that everyone who is hungry ought to be fed. We must have concern for one another's welfare, and slavery and oppression are always morally unacceptable. C.S. Lewis, in his article Screwtape Proposes a Toast, notes that the Christian socialists of the 19th century, instead of, like other dissident movements, becoming roped into massacre, rape, and looting, instead they were engaged in becoming cleaner, more orderly, more thrifty, better educated, and even more virtuous. Those who believe in a return to traditional values should not seek socially regressive policies, but rather a general concern for human welfare and the restoration of virtue and moral values through the creation and inculcation of moral communities. Nian Right. The Nian Right, consisting of influencers like Bronze Age Pervert and others, is a group of those on the right online who subscribe to the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, specifically those elements that assert a vitalist framework that stresses will to power and life energy as major structuring forces of human existence that have been suppressed by modernity. It's an individualistic framework. One ought to strive to assert their vitality over others and against the cruel dance of nature. They see the original sin of modernity as the denial of this vital urge, stemming all the way back to Christianity and Abrahamic monotheism, and instead propose that we return to the pagan way of life, in which nature is infused with vigor and vitality, and thereby we will become healthier ourselves as individuals and society. They make a compelling point that to overturn the failures of modern society, pointing to the rapid decline in health in recent decades, widespread sexual licentiousness, and a liberal regime they see as working against the health of individuals and society, that when we're surging with vitality from health and vigor, we will make much better decisions and live more fulfilling lives as individuals. The Nian Right has a mix of good and bad ideas. Working against religion and religious ethics is short-sighted, and it's very bad because these are the foundations upon which the civilized world was built, and there is no way that we're going to go back to paganism. Further, the will to power is not the correct basis for a moral system. We ought to be life-affirming, but life as a whole is value-neutral. There needs to be a way that we can see that we're all part of this organism, that we have a duty for care and compassion for one another. Genghis Khan was surging with vitality, and he was one of the most brutal and terrible people ever to live. Joseph Stalin asserted his will to power, which ended in the death of tens of millions. The lack of health and vitality in modern society is a major problem, more so than almost anyone has realized, and it is a great part of what has allowed the deleterious shifts in modern culture and society. However, working out and eating healthy and promoting positive living does not need to conflict with a sensible and balanced worldview. It is certainly no basis on which to attempt to destroy all of the metaphysical and ethical basis of Western thought, which is, ironically, the goal of the far left as well. Therefore, through their insistence on vitalism rather than virtue, Nietzscheans contribute more to the cultural and moral subversion of modern society than they fix. While it is true that pursuing excellence is essential, and is essentially lost among most men in the modern age, our woes will not be solved by individuals pursuing their self-serving ends, by directing their ends and goals in life to the service of self, but rather through channeling those ends and goals towards the service of others and the service of God through moral excellence and becoming highly educated and highly intelligent individuals who are able to disseminate insights as to the positive transformation of society. Excellence without virtue begets evil, just as wisdom without love begets cruelty. Nietzscheanism is fundamentally a service to self ideology, which makes it fail on nearly all counts. Mainstream conservatism. Mainstream conservatism is deeply flawed, which is arguably why dissident and alternative right-wing politics have become very popular online. It is locked into a perpetual struggle against liberalism, while never clearly stating its task or purpose or meaningfully opposing the ideology of the ruling class. American conservatism and Republican politics have mainly focused since the Reagan era on what were once popular issues, but now because of their social and economic effects have been understood and are losing stands. Cut taxes, raise spending, and expand the military, which always ends up in the Republicans being passive, giving the Democrats all of the programs that they want in exchange for increased spending on the military-industrial complex abroad to spread the American regime. Trickle-down economics does not improve the material conditions of the working class, but serves who it was always meant to, the corporate and financial class that funds party politics. There is no real trace in the modern GOP of paleo-conservatism, which is more true to the original meaning of conservatism than the modern ideology. And now online media is mainly filled with conservatives who justify and defend social inequality, say the rich are overtaxed, and defend the ruling class and the status quo against all attacks from any angle, and thus serve to reinforce the existing structure of wealth and power and disenfranchise ordinary Americans. They are perpetual losers because of this. The effects of this are ultimately deadly, as propping up the American regime, as affirmed by the left and right alike, ultimately leads to greater suffering and cruelty at home and abroad. It may not sound nice to the interventionist, police of the world Republicans, but for America to fulfill its righteous destiny and create a legitimately good global order, the American regime must fall. Neoconservatives in Bush's cabinet drove us into 2 wars in Iraq, and the intelligence communities are as eager to use a Republican as a Democratic president to further their ends and aims in the world. Further, they have no solid critique of corporate or globalist power, and are thus useless against the true problems that plague the world. As Christopher Langan writes, where every intelligent person on Earth knows that the subversion and collapse of Western civilization and its complete replacement by a despotic global oligarchy would not be good for mankind, the Golden Rule does not oblige anyone to support it. Dissident Right. Dissident right-wing politics doesn't work because, despite claiming to represent the interests of the majority populations of their country, and pointing out many of the obvious flaws in the ruling class and global power structure, there is no love at all. Where are the America First soup kitchens and hospitals, even the monasteries or schools? These huge flashy protests that people fly into are terrible PR and a waste of money that could go into building virtuous communities. The problem I've found with the dissident right is wisdom without love or an ethic of care and compassion. They've been consumed by hatred, the Minotaur, the god of hate and radicalization, and are unable to do anything productive or worthwhile to improve the world or even their own moral character. We need saints and sages, warriors and knights, because we were born behind enemy lines. Because dissident right-wingers seem to believe that any and all impressions towards their ideas are good, they tend to post deliberately shocking, offensive, and provocative content online, which, while appealing to their in-group, makes others recoil in a manner that engaging in calm and collected rational argumentation would not. This is not merely a problem of optics, but of the source and soul of the movement, which seems, based on the online activity of its adherents, to arise not out of care for the majority population of their country, but hatred for all others. To truly improve the world, one must be virtuous. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. If you look at the personalities of many of the leaders of the dissident right movement, many seem like exceptionally hateful and cruel people. It doesn't mean that you have to change your ideas, but you do need to change your character to achieve positive change in the world and present your convictions honestly and forthrightly. What profiteth a man if he should gaineth the whole world, but loseth his soul? Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism seems like an overall positive development and could have served to avail the American First/Dissident Right movement of many of its negative tendencies, but this does not seem to be what has occurred. Most of its adherents don't seem to understand the metaphysical power of Christian nationalism and merely latch on to Christianity as a means to justify their reactionary and traditionalist viewpoints. This is not intrinsically bad, but they are missing the bigger picture. The Christian nationalist movement finds its basis in N.T. Wright's idea of cruciform theocracy, that there is an intrinsic and divine order that underlies reality and directs the aims and goals of human existence as the fullest expression of that teleology, that Christ died on the cross to defeat death and establish himself as the spiritual leader of the body of Christ, the assembly body of the faithful, that through the righteous and brave will save the world and, by embodying Logos as the ideal of human perfection, will bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth. Yet, most of the Christian nationalist discourse that I've seen differs only marginally from dissident right-wing politics, which is a huge problem for a movement that has a potential to truly bring about large-scale changes in the spiritual structure of the world. The metaphysical promise of Christian nationalism finds its fulfillment in N.T. Wright's unification of kingdom and cross, wherein the governments of the world are sanctified, and the whole world converges on an intelligent unity that is the next stage in human planetary evolution. And you may be colored shocked at how far Christian nationalism has strayed from its task and purpose, which is fundamentally the salvation of humanity as a collective. Religious institutions should focus on inculcating virtue in their adherents and becoming a positive structuring force in the world. The world is transformed through saintly men and women who author their own lives and destinies. Religious institutions should focus on preaching morality and accepting every person into their fellowship who accepts the Golden Rule and the Ten Commandments as the ideal towards which they strive to grow. True conservatism or Christian nationalism requires the conservation and nationalization of timeless transcendental values. Learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow, and have a consistent ethic of love and care, and treat others as you would like to be treated. The winning message is as follows. Morality is not arbitrary, but the logical implication of how we should treat others with whom we share an identity as secondary images of God Almighty. Ethics is the logical explication of theism and our role and task in reality. The ruling class and government are behaving unethically in ways X, Y, and Z. We ought to reform the government to bring about righteous leaders who can sanctify the world rather than lead to its further condemnation. You can help by loving your neighbor as yourself and loving God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. And that might be a winning message. Most have a sense that something is awry with modern society, but can't put their finger on it, and might equally well support liberal or conservative causes that they believe will alleviate this enigmatic problem. We'll close with the suggestions of my teacher Christopher Langan on how we can shift the course of humanity into an ideal world. Envision and pray for a better world, lifting your mind high enough to see over the indoctrination and disinformation that conceals it. The first step is to expand the current negative awakening into a positive awakening, which actually contains the vision of a rational and healthy future based on a deep understanding of what reality is and how we can relate to it. This perspective is captured by the CTMU, and it is the only work that can logically bring about a global convergence of ideology and allow humanity to achieve their rightful destiny and intelligently organize around love and understanding. The CTMU is needed, faith in God is needed, tradition and true conservatism is needed. We must honor and protect sacred American institutions while opposing the institutions of the American regime, who increasingly are parasites and interlopers who hate America and Americans. Langan writes, on historical evidence, the greatest explosion of social utility is associated with the rise of the United States, and rational analysis reveals that the U.S. Constitution is much of the reason. The U.S. constitutional republic is arguably the highest form of political order yet achieved. We must defend republicanism through righteous and principled opposition to evil and intentional inculcation of virtue in the electorate, and gear our political activism towards this end. The United States still has an important role to play in fulfilling the destiny of mankind. We are the last standing of the Western world. I leave you with this strategy for success, 10-pronged. Number 1. Love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself, and know that the most acceptable service of God is doing good to one another. Cherish the bonds of love, wisdom, and freedom that bind us to one another, and never succumb to hatred or cruelty. Intelligent unity is the answer, not foolish division. Cherish the United States Constitution, particularly those pesky First and Second Amendments. Never think that you're developing a systematic and comprehensive metaphysical justification of your worldview is a waste of time. Drama politics is a trap. Speak to relevant issues concerning the global power structure, such as the deleterious effects of the rise of central banking in the United States over the last century, suggesting only rational changes in our finance, economics, and culture to more fully represent the true currency of human value. 7. God can work in the world as a higher order entity that can acquire and coordinate the thoughts and activities of the righteous in order to use them as resources in accomplishing his ends, unbeknownst to any one of the servants. Serve God, and he will make all things possible. To quote Chris Langan, if we can all come together around a true understanding of reality, absolute truth, or logos, as it is called in the Bible, then by cooperating under its aegis, we can escape terminal parasitic divergence and save the world from destruction. 9. Materially improve the emissions of people's existence and work to sanctify the world, and your movement will naturally become popular. 10. Develop your own vision, philosophy, and culture. Stand your ground and speak on your own terms, not those of your enemies. Create powerful and vital institutions of your own, and you can win. And of course, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. True conservatism means the preservation of timeless and transcendent values and meaning. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe.